So with the introduction out of the way, it's time to move on to guitar, which I can hopefully cover a bit more in detail. I'm not sure if the last video actually made any sense to anyone besides myself, but it's a concept that I feel has helped me kickstart a lot of songs and get into this groove where I can keep writing without effort. I wasn't sure if I should have released the video, but the reason I did was because I have to reference the concepts and terminology that I introduced from time to time in order to make some points, but with guitar I can be a lot more straightforward. I can't tell you the secret to writing riffs since I have a hard enough time doing that myself, but I can try to talk about them from a conceptual standpoint and give some practical tips that I found useful. So every riff starts off as a chord progression. In metal, the strongest transition is the minor 1/6. There are an endless number of chord progressions based on this transition, from Sabbath's 1/6/7 and Paranoid to every Iron Maiden song on A Matter of Life and Death, which also happens to be the most common chord progression in the world. But you can play around with all sorts of different chord transitions. Once you settle on a chord progression, there are two main components that turn it into a riff. The first is the rhythmic. This can be as simple or as complicated as you like, depending on the style that you're trying to create. From Am I Evil to one of the songs that it influenced, if you approach it my way and establish a rhythmic foundation with your drums, one of the things you can do is you can conform your riff to match different accents, whether it's in the cymbals or it's in the snares or even if it's with some sort of fill. The other component is the melodic component. What we're interested in is the harmony between the melody and the chord progression. This really depends on the style of music that you're playing. While you see more power chords in death metal as well as doom, two-note harmonies in black metal, as I've demonstrated before, or just anything goes in thrash metal like Holy Wars. So that's really all there is to a riff, although I don't want to end this video without really demonstrating anything. So I'll give a couple of approaches to finding riffs that I use based on my own writing experience. Now I use the word finding there instead of writing because it really does seem to me like it's less of creating something and it's more like discovering how to play a certain rhythmic and melodic combination within a chord progression. This is how I view lyrics as well, and I sort of have this idea that songwriters don't create stories, we're just coming up with different ways to tell the same story. Now at the end of the day, my advice is going to be more suitable for black metal because that's what I know. I can't even start writing a thrash or a death metal riff, but some concepts should still carry through. One of the things that I like to do is look for physical patterns on the fretboard between melodies and chords. It's kind of like solving a puzzle. A simple pattern is taking a melody and repeating it over different parts of a chord progression. A lot of Melodeath does this, and the earliest Gothenburg riff that I can think of is Electric Eye by Judas Priest. But I mean, Judas Priest and Iron Maiden basically invented Melodeath anyway, with Iron Maiden's Power Slave, along with Screaming for Vengeance. My best personal example is the riff to Nightmare, which is the second track on my EP Insomnia. The chord progression for the song is A minor 4 times, F major twice, D once, and then E once. The melody that's played along with that is A, B, C, D, A, B, C, E. So I play that melody once over the 4 A minors, and then I repeat it again over the remaining pieces. So A minor, a bit of a slide here, where I just bar the pinky down, and then we have F, a bit of a stretch, and then D, E. The key is finding a melody that's easy to play over a chord progression, but more importantly, it still sounds good. If you're playing diatonic music, that part's pretty easy since every note basically harmonizes every chord, but it can get tricky sometimes. Another thing I like to do is I'll lay down a rule and come up with a riff based on the rule. In my song Shadow, the third track from the demo, my chord progression is based on 2 families of chords. By family, I mean sets of chords that share the same common tones, like for example C major and E minor, or B minor and D major. These happen to be the 2 families that I use in the song, which is in E minor. The main chord change is between the 1 chord and the 5 chord. The rule for this song is that E family chords get 2 measures of G, 1 measure of F sharp, and 1 measure of G. The B family chords get the opposite. I'll demonstrate the secondary riff in the song as opposed to the main one since it's straight to the point. Start with E minor, B minor, D major, E minor with no melody, C major with a great Lydian fourth, E minor, D major, and then we end with B minor. About that 1 E minor chord with no melody, while I do like finding and using patterns, at the end of the day my goal is to create music that sounds good. I don't like to write anything for the sake of just having it, so I will abandon a pattern in favor of something that I believe sounds better. Now I could go through every other song I've written and all the different patterns that are in them. That's something that I do want to do in the future, but it'll take forever if I try to cram it in right now. There's one more simple tool that I want to bring up, and that's the pedal points. It's when you hold one note consistently through a section, I guess the chord progression. The name comes from the sustain pedal on the piano, and my song Visions does this for the most part with the G. An easy way to come up with one of these riffs is to just take a chord progression, find a strumming pattern, and pick a note to hold through the pattern. So if we want to come up with a song right now, let's say D minor, A minor, C, G major. This is acoustic guitar, so we'll just do a straightforward strum up down pattern, as every acoustic guitar song has. And let's pick 2 notes to hold through the pattern, a D and an open E. So our riff would sound something like this. If that sounds familiar to you, it's because this is the opening riff to the song Ultra Temps by Alcest. Nij uses this technique a lot in his music, and I really like to study Alcest because I find that his approach to songwriting is a bit similar to mine, even though we're trying to create different sounds. While on the topic of studying music, my final advice is this. When I go to learn a song, I try to do more than just memorize the notes. I like to put myself in the head of the songwriter and go through the steps they took to arrive at their conclusion. I suppose what I'm trying to do with these videos is to bridge that gap and just give you my thought process up front, but obviously it's going to take more than one source if you want to diversify your knowledge and increase your songwriting capabilities. But the next time you go to learn a riff, try and understand where that riff is coming from. By doing this, you can get a lot more out of practice, and you might discover a technique that will help you write your own riffs in the future. Now, one of the last things I want to admit is that a lot of my music comes out of sudden inspiration. I can sit with my guitar, a pen and paper, and try to just crush out as many patterns as I want, but they could all just be duds. But occasionally, out of nowhere, usually in like some sort of inconvenient time, you'll just get hit with a riff or some lyrics that's just really good, and that ends up turning into a song. It's not really a thing you can control. I like to think of it as sort of a subconscious writing that's akin to dreaming, where we take our experiences, mash them together, and then create these spontaneous images in our head. In this case, we take the music we like, and sometimes music that we don't like, but it's stuck in our head anyways. This is where you'll end up ripping off ideas occasionally, which is an unavoidable part about songwriting, since you have so many people trying to write over the same handful of chord progressions, and we absorb so much from our influences. It's hard to avoid, introducing too much from what we like. Although that is a topic for another video. For now, I hope that there are some takeaways you can get from this one. Hopefully discovering a new approach to writing, or even just thinking of riffs and trying to understand them in a different way.